After Galwan, we now know that there was a sort of massive military build-up, and we sort of leveraged it to get the Chinese to pull back from positions near Pangong So Lake, but then the rest didn't happen. There's been disengagement, but not actually pulled back by the Chinese. But this border dispute has been long and complex for years. What feels different about it today, and what feels different, if anything, about the Indian response?
Well, I think to start with, and I would humbly beg to differ from General Narasimhan, analysts are not hurt. This is a question of the citizens of India, and unlike China, India is a democracy. So when something that threatens India's borders, of the sort of standoff we have seen over the last 3 years, does take place, I don't think it behoves any of us, let alone analysts, to be pretending that we should not worry about them because these things are being taken care of somewhere else. What you refer to with the Galwan conflict and the clashes that led to the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers, and we don't know how many Chinese soldiers because they don't say, was exactly proving this point, because up till that point we had heard from the government that nothing was happening at the line of actual control, when in fact Chinese troops were amassing since April 2020, at least we know. They were taking positions along the line of actual control, outside of their boundaries and inside ours, and they were denying patrolling access to Indian troops for a very long time. Now, if it took Galwan to tell us that, surely since then we would have been entitled to a little more information about what is happening over there. When a police officer in Ladakh writes a report that is used in the MHA's own conference and says that we have lost our access to nearly half of 65 patrolling points, then the reaction to that report is not to explain what has happened and why India has lost that access. The reaction seems to be, let's just take it down from the website it was put up on, and not talk about it ever again. Now, I don't think that is the way forward, particularly, as I said, in a democracy, particularly, as I said, when we are seeing China taking steps. Okay, so this is the third time that China is renaming something in Arunachal. When was the first time? 2017. When was the second time? 2021. That's not very long ago. It's all happening in recent times. If we are to pretend that each of these are just straws in the wind and we can just sort of turn away from them and behave like it's all okay, I don't know if that level of preparedness is on its way to being done. Secondly, I do think somewhere there has to be some kind of explanation for the kind of relationship that India and China has today. We hear from the External Affairs Minister that normalcy is not allowed, and normalcy cannot happen until we see normalcy at the line of actual control. Even so, we do see that there have been talks, that there have been meetings at the foreign minister's level, that there have been meetings at the defense minister's level, as well as at the national security advisor's level. We also see, as you said, that there is an SCO conference, and obviously India is a member of the SCO. They will invite China, which is a founding member of the SCO, to India. But the question has to be, how are we approaching this? Is it going to be that the Chinese foreign minister, as he did for the G20 foreign ministers meeting, will come? There will be some discussion between him and the foreign minister on the line of actual control, and we move on. There'll be another meeting, presumably in Goa. President Xi Jinping is invited not once but twice to India later this year. Are we just going to pretend that yes, it's okay, it's all in a multilateral context, but we don't have to actually move forward on what is obviously a concern? If Indian Jawans are having to man this 3,500 kilometer boundary year after year in ways that they've not had to before, if there is going to be some kind of impact on India's military resources when it comes to the China threat, and that could impact other things as well. We do know that there have been parts of the army that have been moved from one LOC to the LAC. The truth is, I don't think we can look away, regardless of how much we are told from the top that everything is okay.
Let's also, Adil, talk a little bit about Bhutan and Doklam. We had the king of Bhutan in town, but he came against the backdrop of the Bhutan Prime Minister actually suggesting that China had an equal say in what happens next in Doklam. Now, satellite images have long shown China's build-up. We can play some of those images, Adil. How concerned should we be about the Bhutanese, a long sort of close friend of India, making this kind of public statement? Obviously, there was some damage control after the King of Bhutan's visit, but how do you see what's those public utterances? Can we unmute Adil, please? Adil, can you unmute yourself? I think you muted at your end. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to be quite concerned about what's happening in Bhutan. Bhutan has gone from saying that China is not exactly party to the Doklam tri-junction dispute to now saying that they are party to this dispute. And what Beijing wants is to establish direct diplomatic ties with Thimphu, and that's something has everybody in New Delhi concerned. And Beijing has now set that agenda very clearly, and they have made statements about it. There's articles written by Chinese experts. What do they exactly want? And I don't think anybody in New Delhi will accept that as a new reality that what Prime Minister of Bhutan mentioned in his interview. And we should be quite concerned if it is Doklam Tri-Junction today and they can come back with new claims, as China seems to be doing with historical sort of claims that they come up with now and then with the areas towards west of Bhutan, which were never claimed by Beijing before, are now being claimed by China in a loud manner. So we should be continuing where Bhutan go. So the internal politics of Bhutan is something we don't really understand. New Delhi appears to be quite certain about how things are happening in Thimphu, but we should not be so sure about which way Thimphu will sway. And I think that's something people in New Delhi need to be concerned about.
Okay, so let me take that to General Narasimhan, sir. Since you've said that you believe everything is on the right track, are you alarmed by the Bhutan Prime Minister's sort of public statements? And if there's one thing that you would advise the government at this point to be doing, what would it be?
You see, but the Bhutan Prime Minister made 3 points mainly in that interview that he gave to that periodical in the West.
Yes.
One is that he said that in Doklam, Dolam as we call it, because I commanded my brigade and a division there, and so I call it Dolam. So what he said was that in the area of resolving Dolam, all three parties should be involved in it, and that is what we have been saying. What I've been saying when 2017 happened, it is a tri-junction area where if there is any change to the status quo has to be effected, all the three parties should come to that conclusion. That is what we had mentioned. So that is what he reiterated actually. The second thing he said about was that he says in 1 or 2 meetings, if the others are on board, we'll be able to divide the line or something like that is made a statement. It is not so simple. I mean, they have signed those 3-point MOU about a year ago, and we have signed that about 17 years ago, rather 20 years ago, and then we are still stuck. So it is not going to be so simple as it was expressed. And the other thing he mentioned about when he was asked about the villages and all getting constructed, he says, we know what Bhutan territory is what he said. So the issue that comes up is, what he said is there, what he said. And the feeling that I get from the discussions I hear is that we are not so concerned about Bhutan. I think we are very, very concerned about Bhutan. I've served in Bhutan for 2 years in the Intrat there. And I also served in the division and the brigade, which is bordering Bhutan. I think we are very, very serious about what is happening in Bhutan. And we do understand Bhutan far more than anybody else would like to believe. So to that extent, I am sure the concerns when His Majesty was here, I am sure that would have been discussed and the concerns would have been expressed. I am very sure of it.
Sebastian Sinha, last word, sir.
Well, I hope that we are taking all these things very seriously, but it is important to ensure that the diplomatic protests that are normally made when a country feels offended are done. We cannot keep treating China with kid gloves or with fear. As you yourself mentioned, when things happened in England or in other places, we summoned their ambassadors. We did not do that in the case of China. Now, we need to start doing these things.